Dearly redheaded, we are choosing consciousness today to get through this thing called grief. Interesting word, grief. It means love, which makes for a mighty good joke. But I'm here to tell you, there's nothing else. Just joy. And if the big picture tends to bring you down, go crazy once your life goes. Woo!
Good morning, all. I'm here with Kerry McAvoy, Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I am so little girl excited about having her here with me. I didn't sleep last night. My heart's beating madly. Kerry responded to me weeks ago. She was put on my radar as a result of a video. I don't remember where I saw it, Kerry, but you were able to succinctly speak to the damage that occurs to the brain as a result of long-term CPTSD. You remember that video?
Yeah, I do. It actually came out of a YouTube Live. Yeah, okay. So I was doing a YouTube Live on cognitive dissonance.
Yes. And before we go there, would you just give a little bit of your background?
Yeah, so I'm actually in my 60s, and I'm a retired clinical psychologist. I have a mom of 3 sons, and about 10 years ago, I was widowed quite unexpectedly from cancer. My late husband died of a very rare form of cancer, and in my grief, and I began to date really rapidly, and I met and married somebody I thought was amazing, felt like a fairy tale. And I discovered that on a delayed honeymoon, the last night of delayed honeymoon, that the whole relationship was essentially a lie, that I actually didn't know the man at all, and that I would been duped, conned. So we spent the next 2 years trying to salvage what he seemingly wanted to, which really actually he didn't, a disastrous, abusive marriage. Now, when I use the word abuse, I wouldn't have told you I was being abused. I didn't know that I was, because I didn't really, it's wild. Here I'm a psychologist, a clinical psychologist with over 25 years of clinical experience, and I didn't know what abuse was. I thought it was domestic violence. And because that wasn't happening, then I assumed that what was going on in this relationship was just a bad relationship. But I got out of the relationship feeling extraordinarily crazy and wanted to make sense of what just happened to me. So I started to dig into the psychology, which ironically, again, I knew a whole lot about personality disorders, and I even knew he likely had one. But I didn't know that personality disorders create relational harm in relationships, that they're harmful to their partners and families. And so in my effort to make sense of the craziness, I began to write Love You More, which is a memoir. It tells what happened to me. And then I also started to just write about it and then create content, which has brought me here today.
Oh my God, I wish you had a penis. Thank you. Okay, so at what point would you say, and I prefer complex post-traumatic stress injury versus disorder. Mm-hmm. I know it hasn't
makes sense because it's an injury. You're right. It's a wound. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I got that from Prince Harry like a couple years ago, and I drop it because it's not the popular nomenclature. Is that what I mean? That's never a word that I...
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know where that fucking word came from, but I that's how I mean it. So did you, how soon did you figure out that's what you had?
That I had been traumatized from it, or had probably had PTSD. Well, what's hard for me is that I was an early childhood survivor of SA, of sexual assault. So I already had a very profoundly difficult history, which, and interestingly enough, I know most people would meet me and would say, she doesn't look like she has PTSD. And I don't know if I would say that I do. I have an anxiety disorder, and I struggle with it at times, but I don't know if I have PTSD per se.
Got it.
But I got out of that relationship and I felt so not myself, dysregulated, obsessed. I needed to make it make sense. I realized when I was in the relationship that I was paralyzed, that I couldn't make a decision. I experienced for the first time in my life selective mutism often in that relationship, which is really basically, you need to say something, you want to say something, and you can't make yourself say it. And what the block was significant anxiety. I felt, I said I was an early childhood survivor of sexual assault. What's interesting is when I compare those two experiences, that assault and living under that just threat, a chronic threat of assault versus this relationship, the terror was the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt, even though this guy never called me a bad name, the worst he ever said was, "You're an overweight menopausal woman." Seriously, that's the worst he ever said to me out loud. But yeah, I felt real terror, like mouth dried terror around this person.
Wow. Okay. I didn't mean to assume you had CPTSD, so I apologize.
Oh, no. I don't know. Nobody's ever said that to me. I've never been diagnosed with it. No, but I do know a lot of people walk out of these relationships and they do. And it makes sense that they do, because here's the other startling, terrifying statistics about narcissistic abuse. And I've been looking to see if I can find the original, the research that says this, but it came from Sandra Brown. She said it, and I've done some conversations with AI, and it confirmed that there are studies out there that says this. But when they look at the comparison of war veterans versus narcissistically abused partners, victims, they find the rates of PTSD higher among the narcissistically abused victims than they do among war veterans.
I know.
Which, isn't that bizarre? That's like wild.
No, it's not. And coming off track, and between you and Brian, bring me back to Kerry's video, because what I want to discuss what you said in that video, it's along these lines. No, that doesn't surprise me at all. I just wish we would stop calling it narcissistic abuse and elevate it.
What would you like to call it? What do you think is a better label?
Socio-psychopathic abuse.
Oh, you know what Sandra Brown calls it? She calls it relational harm. She has a word for it too. She's the originator of this whole topic. I don't know if you realize that.
No, I don't. Sandra Brown.
Yeah, Sandra L. Brown. It was her pinnacle stuff. Well, actually, she'll say, I've been looking into this for the past 30 to 40 years. Yeah, that's true. She's been looking at this population and the outcome of what happens when you're in a relationship with this population. I don't know where the word narcissistic abuse has come from. She would say she doesn't like it either. I've actually heard her say that.
It doesn't make sense.
She hears me say this. I hope she doesn't mind that I'm saying it. But
no, it's psychological coercion, and it has to be elevated, because the narcissism thing is being tossed around, and we're all capable of being narcissistic, and it's redeemable. And I would argue it to my grave that there's a certain percentage of people that are outside that realm that pretty much control the rest of us, and that's white collar psychopathy. I've talked about it before. So narcissistic abuse just does a tremendous injustice to especially women like you and me that are autistic. Like, we want to get to the fucking bottom of this, and we want to help, but I don't think narcissism does the and I use the word all the time too, but it narrows the scope too much. That's the problem. It's not just narcissists that do this. It's anybody who's predatory. Right. Amen. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. All right. So in that video that I witnessed, you talked about, and we don't have to talk about, I use AI, you used AI. AI is definitely going to forge us ahead in this particular realm. You were able to speak to, the things that stuck out for me is the hippocampus is under pressure, very often reduced inside. The amygdala is hypervigilant, right?
Yeah. There's three areas of the brain is being profoundly impacted by chronic gaslighting, reality distortions, self-perception distortions that are occurring in these relationships. So you get into the relationship and you feel something is off, but you really don't know what's off, but something just doesn't feel right because you don't realize that your partner is chronically deceiving you or misleading you or intimidating you so there's this threat, this chronic sense of threat, which puts your body, your mind into hypervigilance state, into a fight or flight state, and it starts just to kind of chronically remain there. And because of that, it's centered in the amygdala, which is way back at the base of your brain, right next to your spinal cord, which makes sense because it helps run the whole rest of the body. It says to the body, we're safe or we're not safe, and it sends out signals to get us ready to meet the threat, or it tells us to calm down and that we're okay and we can go to sleep or digest food or do other things. And so it sits way back in the base. But because it's in this chronic state of hypervigilance, it begins to swell and get larger because we're overusing it. And with that then means we get jumpier, we start to scan for threat, we feel like we can't really relax because it's so activated. We become dysregulated at a sort of like a baseline level in our bodies. But at the same time, this chronic experience of threat and dis-ease that we're feeling also then affects the way in which we remember things and how that's the hippocampus. The hippocampus is in the center of the brain. It's the emotions part. It's the limbic system, part of the limbic system, which sits where the emotions and processing occurs. And it's also the memory system, and that part is actually shrinking. When you feel chronically threatened, I don't know the word for it, we consolidate memories differently. So that's why when you notice that people who've experienced this type of trauma, they talk in a way about what happened in a very different way. They don't, like say for example, somebody asked you, what did you do for Christmas? You will recall it sequentially. You'll describe the events as they happened. You have sort of this cohesive description of a memory. But when you're in a state of trauma, you're frightened, you're upset, or you're distressed, the memories don't get put away in the same way. They're more raw. They're not processed. So they're disjointed. And when you recall them, it brings back the experience. So you feel re-traumatized recalling the experience because there's a lack of cohesiveness, a lack of processing. So the hippocampus is being affected and it's starting to shrink. And then the last part of the brain that's being affected is because the amygdala is in a fight or flight state, it's in an on state, an alert state, it tells the front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, you don't really need to be involved. I've got this. I'm handling it. I'm telling the body to get ready to move because we're in danger. So the thinking part of your brain that does planning, it helps make predictions, it's logical, it's reasonable, all that part of the brain goes quiet. It gets darker, less active. It's not firing as much. So that means that's help you struggle finding words, you struggle making a plan, you don't really know what next. You may start to find yourself forgetful. So because it's not being activated to be used because the back part of the brain, which is the more primitive part of the brain, is saying, hey, I'm running the show because we're in a crisis here. And the problem is this is great when say you're on the road right now and somebody almost like gets into your lane. That's awesome because then you react. And that's the purpose of it. It's to help you react. Somebody right now walked in on you and held you guys up at a gunpoint, you would react. That's the point of it. But what happens is that we stay in this state for long periods of time, and it's not meant to do that. And when that happens, it changes your brain. It changes the structure, you structurally. So it's not just it's changing you chemically, but it's changing the structures itself, leaving you injured, psychologically or neurologically injured by the chronic state of threat.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's the biggest question I get from people, and it's changed me. I know it's changed me. I used to be an avid reader. I could read a book a day. These days, I struggle to pick a book up. Why? Because it's changed my attention. My attention span is shortened. People could say, well, you're also on social media. Isn't that also affecting you? Yeah, well, maybe, but this had to do with, it's a direct outcome of that relationship. I went into the relationship able to read. I came out of the relationship, I struggled to read. I struggle with the attention. I've heard a lot of people say, I don't know if there's any research into this, so it's just something I'm hearing anecdotally, that a lot of people feel like it helped, they developed ADD from
There
it.
you go. Didn't I say,
Yeah.
fuck, yes. Long-term dissociation, man. Thank you. Holy shit. When's the wedding? Anyway, all right. This is huge. This is huge. But before I go to where I'm very organized, the upside of it. The upside, the intuition, the consciousness, the multidimensional thinking, the spirituality. Do you also see that correlation?
You're right. I think what it does, at least for me, I mean, again, I don't know what the research is on this, but for me, it's helped me to create a new self, because these are self-shattering experiences.
Yeah, soul murder.
It is soul murder. It sort of dismantles who you are as you come under the control. That's what's really happening. You're submitting yourself in order to save the relationship to the control of another person. And then they become basically kind of empty out who you are, and they rebuild you into who they want you to be. And that kills, it's a death, a form of a death. And when you get out of these relationships, I really think a lot of us are like phoenixes. We need to rise up out of the ashes of that death and then rediscover ourselves. And I think in that process, there's a lot of potential for growth. Who I am today, I like her better than I've ever liked me in my life. But is that true for every person who's experienced this? No, I know that. I know there's a lot of people that feels like it destroyed them and they don't know if they'll ever get any part of themselves back. I get that. But I do think it offers an opportunity to really ask some big questions about who you are and who you want to be. And I do think there is a spiritual component to me. I mean, for me, it's changed. I mean, I was a pretty staunch conservative Christian prior to this, and it's changed my view. Not so much of it. Maybe it has changed. I just still believe in God and believe in Christ, but it's changed the way in which I see the church, because it's changed the way I see power structures.
Right.
So I struggle with power structures. I don't trust them these days.
Oh, this is so good. Thank you. All right. So now I'm going to go back to where we were sort of post learning about the brain injury. And I wrote a hippocampus joke for you. Because the hippocampus is so involved with cortisol, and I can feel in recent weeks the cortisol coursing through me because of what I'm talking about, and I fully expect that at some point that'll change as a result of getting the poison out. But I call it hippocampus potamus.
Yeah.
And even though it's reduced by the stress, just the cortisol, the body. I have much more, my mind has healed much more than my body has, which is to be expected from covert abuse. And I'm very, very gentle with myself. And I'm actually, of late, meditating into my heart, because my body needs a break and my mind needs a break. So why not, help the heart. But the terms that come up, and I've discussed them on this podcast before, and I don't know what you know about me. Do you want to know a quick history of me? Or?
Yeah, because I don't know much about you. So yeah, I would love to hear your story, or a little, whatever part of it you'd feel comfortable sharing.
Very quickly, I was 54, taking care of my mother, who died in May of 24. While I was caring for my mother, I woke up to sibling abuse, 5 much older siblings. That came out of therapy. And by 2017-18, I had worked very hard to separate from my siblings. and not destroy their relationship with my mom. And it was a clusterfuck because I stood up to abuse, and you can imagine it got worse. Much to my chagrin where my mother was concerned. I actually just spent this last episode explaining that part of it. So it wasn't until 2020, when I had been out of my marriage 10 years, that I recognized that I had moved from antisocial disordered siblings, that I had been involved with my ex-husband, who just very sociopathic. I differentiate between sociopathic and psychopathic by sociopathic is more of a bar fighter. Psychopath is more of a prize fighter. So that's
that's a good way to. Yeah, I like that. That's a great delineation.
Yeah, I got that from Romney in an interview she did with somebody, Kyle Kittleson. I destroy people's names, and I'm face blind.
I got to meet her, actually.
You told me that, and I'm just
She confronted me. She took maybe 1 minute of my story, because I used to call him a narcissistic sociopath, and she looked at me and said, "Kerry, he's a psychopath. You know that?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, you're right. He's a psychopath." Well,
she's kind of changed her tune. It was narcissism, and then finally, I listened to her a little bit because I'm beyond narcissism. But she came back in my world because she talked about sociopathy and psychopathy. So I can't speak to, I think when she's talking about narcissists, more often she's talking about psychopathy and sociopathy, but I'd have to ask her. So anyway, in 2020, when I woke up to realizing my ex was brutally cruel, we were together 20 years. I then also had to wake up to, I had aligned my two sons with my family, my in-laws, my ex. I couldn't have done a worse job of, and I don't mean as a mom, but I was in this position to now I'm stepping away from family, stepping away from all this abuse, and now my poor kids are aligned with my abusers. And I realized that was going to be very, very isolating. And we're not estranged, but it's low contact. And they're also in their 20s, so they're individuating, but there's the influences of the quote-unquote others is, you can imagine. It's unbelievable. And I've made it funny because that's how I've survived. When my mother died, and my mother was my best friend. She was en route back to my father, her soulmate. There was a lot of beautiful things about it. But I knew I was going to be free from a lot in losing her. And I was looking forward to that greatly. But that's when some of these folks came on really strong where my boys were concerned. And I knew it in a certain part of my brain. But I used THC when my mom died. I'm not a big substance user because I have psychedelic experiences. So I made the conscious decision to process the grief of losing her with THC. She also went out on THC, I should tell you that, because I had exposure to one of my abusers in particular that kind of put me over the edge. Mm-hmm. And I said to the people around me, who knew I was using THC, who knew I had psychedelic experiences, I said, hey, listen, when she passes, don't leave me alone and let me sleep for a week. That didn't happen. I'm not going to get into it. I ended up having a 5-day dissociative episode, rage. I had a rage event like you wouldn't believe. And I was unconscious enough during that time that I had done severe damage to my liver and kidneys. There's more to that story. I'm actually going to be telling that upcoming in the podcast. So it was horrible. It was horrible, but it was also a clearing of my unconscious for 50 fucking years. Mm-hmm. So I go in the hospital, and they're rehabbing my liver and my kidneys. And there's a lot I'm not saying in the interest of time. It's brutal. And after a week, I think I'm going home, and they're like, no. There's this other place you got to visit. And they put me in a psych ward. And now it's like, the story, you give a mouse a cookie. Now you put a sane person in a psych ward who knows they have CPTSD and who's pretty clear on enough that that's not where I belonged. But I decided to turn it into, let's see what they do to fucking women when we get here. And, bipolar and borderline and major depression. And I'm like, oh, okay, what about that diagnosis I have of CPTSD and being autistic? No. You've dramatically become bipolar. And I know people who are bipolar, and I know that I'm not, so I'm not making fun of that. I just think it's a very often women who are on the autistic spectrum who have PTSD, it's not uncommon to say they're bipolar or borderline. So they wouldn't let me out without being on a med. The med fucked me up. But they wouldn't let me out without it. I still don't know how they kept me there for 2 weeks, but they did. And there's a lawsuit. There's some things going on. I can't. It's been a year and a half. I came out of the experience. I happened to do Pilates between two therapists. My therapist had thrown me under the bus in ways that I can't wait to talk about because it just speaks to that power structure. He being a man of a certain age, and let me not go there, but I said, listen, I had this experience. Send me, where am I going? And they sent me to a woman in New York City who specializes in dissociation. And our first meeting, she said, you've been dissociating since you were 4 years old. And nothing you've done isn't a disorder. And I don't know how I got lucky enough to find the person that had the specialty, but bang, zoom, that she and I, we don't, I don't need cognitive therapy. I need to heal and continue to heal. But I had done 10 years of CPTSD work prior to my episode. So I was very, as sad and horrible as it was, I was also extremely equipped to deal with it. Does that make sense? Because I want to talk to you.
It does make sense. And because I was, as you were talking, I was looking up how often does this happen, this story? Because what I know is it came out when it came out this last year out of Australia, and it was, granted, it was work with rats, but they found a link, they call it a vulnerable link between autism and trauma.
Yes.
So the word vulnerable link means something in research. What it means is that the trauma or the damage goes both directions. So what they found was that autistic people are more likely to experience experiences as traumatizing that maybe to somebody else would not be. That's why, so when somebody says, you're too loud and you're upsetting me, say if you have a auditory sensitivity, it could be traumatizing to an autistic person with that sensitivity, whereas it would not be traumatizing to somebody else. The other problem, though, is when an autistic person experiences trauma, it worsens the autistic symptoms. So they're more likely to experience things traumatizing because the sensitivity is a lot higher. And whatever is traumatizing is also worsening the autism.
All right, now I'm weeping like a dope.
Yeah, so it goes both ways. And I was just talking to Claude AI about this, and it says, yes, what often happens, and I saw it. I worked at the hospital. I've had, let's see, how many years did I experience work? I have a year and a half experience at the hospital. One of the hospitals was one step up from state level care. So imagine state level care being catastrophic, chronic. It's talking people like don't recover, get hospitalized. Carrie,
let's go into the second episode. So we
okay.
I want to start right where you're at.
Thank you for listening and supporting Natural Born Redhead. If you follow the bouncing balls, please like and subscribe. If you know someone interested in sparing others grief and inciting joy, message me on Facebook or reach out via my website, Natural Born Redhead. J-Ma.